Score, the podcast. The only show taking you inside the studios of the world's most celebrated composers and musical storytellers.
We're back, man.
Oh, it's been a long, cold winter. Does that make you like kind of Game of Thrones cold?
Oh,
yeah.
Perfect timing.
But in keeping with our incredible synchronicity, Game of Thrones is back, and in bigger news, Score Season 2 has returned.
Finally. We've been talking about it and planning, and a lot has been going on behind the scenes. We also want to thank our coordinator, Carol, who's joined the team, and she's been kicking butt and helping us get this off the ground.
She may be our mother of dragons. Is that a stretch?
I am your host, Kenny Holmes, with my co-host, Robert Kraft.
Yep.
And we actually have a special guest today, and it may sound weird that he's a special guest because joining us is Matt Schrader.
Is that Schrader?
Matt Schrader.
I am a special guest this time, yeah.
Matt will not be joining the entire season. He's been very busy.
Well, you know what they say, when you're big, you're busy. So Matt has gone on to glamorous new ventures.
But we wanted to have him on today for the season premiere because it's a big day. Not only is this show premiering its season 2 episode, but Matt has a new project that we've been working a little bit together on, but he wrote and created, and it's out today as well, and it's called Blockbuster. So we're going to talk about that and let you hear the trailer.
And in fact, go subscribe. Don't play it yet. Keep listening.
Yeah.
But go on over in your podcast
that way you don't forget.
App. Look up Blockbuster.
Yeah, the first episode
Spielberg
is out.
And Lucas.
Yeah.
And John Williams, of course. But we'll talk more in just a minute.
I can tell you, being a Blockbuster...
These guys have heard, I think, most or parts.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
You may, I may even be a couple voices
That's
in
right.
there.
Oh, you mean, would that be the same voice of the Song Award winner Kenny Holmes, who rumor has it? Did you just win a song for writing a song about meat?
Okay.
You have to explain this.
I was posting about it. If you follow me on social media, we had quite a campaign, or a ham-pain, as I was calling it.
Oh, boy.
But there's a sports morning show, the Dan Patrick Show, national show, and they did a contest covering famous songs and rewriting the lyrics about barbecuing, and I submitted a song, and needless to say, I'm an award-winning meat composer, and
Meet the composer.
I won a Traeger barbecue grill, which I'm very excited about, and you guys...
You could start a new podcast called Meet the Composer.
Oh.
A little spin-off series.
I like that.
Just thinking, since we're launching podcasts and things. You know.
And it could be all about BBQs. Cues.
Oh.
And followed by some BBQs as in questions.
Oh,
nice.
man.
We need a kind of...
All right,
We're definitely
move
back.
on.
Yeah, what is happening here?
I'm derailing the first episode already.
Thanks so much.
A lot has happened since our season finale last year with Lauren Balfe. The awards came out.
Yeah.
Kind of some crazy stuff happened there. Justin Hurwitz wins the Golden Globe, doesn't get nominated for an Oscar. It doesn't happen very often, but it has happened before.
It happened to me. I was nominated for a Golden Globe. May I simply share with our devoted audience for a song I co-wrote with Babyface? It was in the film, I'm trying to think, Anna and the King. It was in the film Anna and the King. Golden Globe nomination. I started to prepare my Oscar speech. I got my tux already. Oscars were announced, and no, thank you, Robert Kraft. Yeah, so it
Is
happens.
there anything sadder than an Oscar speech that never is read?
Well, both my
Out loud?
dogs actually thought it was a great speech. So, there was
there you
that
go.
upside.
So you got
But it's
something.
kind of bittersweet for Justin, though, because you can't be that sad holding your Golden Globe and not getting...
He won. That's the difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was a great score.
And then, of course, Ludwig Göransson just completely dominating.
Crushed.
Wins the Oscar for Best Score, wins 2 Grammys, one for Best Score and one for Best Song, which I don't know if... Has that happened before?
I wonder. I'm not sure.
He's
have
producing
to go back to
Childish Gambino's music, so he's a Grammy-winning hip-hop producer and the Best Score in the same night, which is just crazy.
Yeah.
major success for Ludwig. And
Yep.
Are we looking at like a new school here of composers?
You know what? It's interesting you mention it. We haven't talked about that particular topic, but I've been thinking how there's an old guard now that used to be the guard.
Yeah.
In other words, there was a whole crew, and they know who they are.
The usual suspects?
Usual suspects. It's like studio musicians, too. There were a whole wrecking crew, and then they were replaced with a certain era who played on all the records, and now they're new cats. Same with composers, and I think we're seeing a very interesting new group.
Class. We got
Yep.
Ludwig, Justin Hurwitz, Nicholas Britell, Benjamin Wallfish, who's having a huge year with two scores and movies coming out back-to-back with Hellboy and Shazam. And,
Yep.
He's crushing it. So
Tamar Kali
and Pinar. I mean,
Pinar.
all these new faces popping up
Yep.
and making major headlines.
I'll tell you one other who I am really excited to hear and listen to his output, which is Michael Abels, who did Us and Get Out. And I thought the score for Us was just incredible. I really loved it. I thought not only was the vocal stuff and the choral stuff cool, but that put 5 on it.
Oh, well, what a great
That was
idea
just
to
awesome.
take a popular song
Yeah.
and orchestrate it. And I'm sure that grabbed attention of people who never even thought about film music before, which is always a great sign when you're bringing in new audiences
Yep.
like that.
It also brought Loonies back onto the charts
Yes.
with that song.
Which is what's one of my favorite songs.
Yeah, it was just
Got a lot
great.
of play.
So Michael's part of the new crop, and just a lot of young composers starting to. And it's interesting for all of you nascent composers. These names have not been unknown to the community for many years. They're just now getting their moments. They were assistants. They were arrangers. They were orchestrators. It's not
Isn't
like they just...
Abels like a high school
He
music
was,
teacher
yeah.
too?
So he really has kind of
What a cool
showed up.
story.
Yep. But some of the others, Benjamin Wallfish, great arranger, Pinar, they were names that were known to the community, and they're now getting their real shots as the composer.
Awesome. And you like that awesome, Matt?
Awesome.
That was for you. I didn't even mention our big guest for our season premiere. We're really excited to finally get Bear McCreary on the show. And Bear has a lot of stuff coming up, including what he just announced.
Listen to that crowd. They're going nuts.
After we recorded our episode with our interview with Bear, just a couple of days ago, he put out this trailer that he's scoring the new Chucky Child's Play movie, and it's such a creative way to announce a composer, and you see all the
Great trailer.
child musical instruments that he's using, and it's very creepy, and then you see Bear lit all dramatically. I thought,
And
it
it's
was
also
great.
cool because it's the film that's sharing that and kind of promoting the composer,
Yeah.
which is it seems like a rarity, but we do see that happen occasionally, and that's really cool with Bear. Because he makes everything fun.
We
He's
like
great
that.
in that regard.
We would like major motion picture studios and TV networks and platforms to start announcing each new project first with who's composing it. I think that's
It
more
plays
important.
a major role. They should do that.
More important
like
than
they're
the
announcing
stars,
an
the
actor or
story.
anything.
Exactly right.
So we're going to talk to Bear about God of War, his huge video game domination.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's won every video game industry award, and also for the music. And also next month, he's got Godzilla, King of the Monsters coming out, which is really exciting. So we'll talk to Bear about that. Robert, this Friday,
We got some cool-
that movie's finally coming out that we got a sneak peek at last year.
We had such, for all of you who remember the score episode with Harry Gregson Williams.
Episode 2, I think.
It was episode 2. When we were in his studio, which must be 8-10 months ago, a year ago, he was in the middle of scoring a beautiful film called Penguins, which we got a chance to look at and listen to. And it comes out this Friday, and couldn't be more on time, certainly with the new series that's on Netflix called Our Planet.
Our Planet. Man, 4K... It's so amazing.
It is amazing. I've seen many episodes listening to the wonderful score by Stephen Price, who will be our guest in the next few weeks.
Oh.
Ooh.
Wait a second. Did you just drop something? Oops.
Breaking news.
I'm still
Stephen
getting
Price.
used to this board, Matt. You got to teach me a thing or two.
What was that? What was
I kind
that?
of like the first one, which was Stephen Price.
Yeah, give
and
us that again.
Tinkerbell.
It was just a little heavenly.
But
our planet is beautiful.
It is beautiful. Our planet is beautiful, and penguins I'm looking forward to. I think there are a couple others. This one's hard to pronounce, but I liked the trailer, La Llorona.
Oh, it's a scary one.
Scary one. I'm looking forward to probably seeing that through my fingers because I cover my face for many of those. But some good ones coming up, and then we're into the summer season, and there's going to be
there's a ton of stuff coming up. Avengers is coming out, and Godzilla, and we'll get to all of that throughout the season. So thanks for sticking with us, and of course, be sure to tell a friend, share the podcast, rate and review, all that good stuff. But let's get to it. We have Matt Schrader here in the studio. Let's get one more round of applause.
Another round of, please, everyone. Let's come on. You're embarrassing
Let's
me.
do this before we start talking about Blockbuster. Let's just go ahead and give the audience a little 30-second teaser trailer to give them an idea.
Oh, we have that?
Oh, we do. Let's see if we have it. Let me see if I have that.
Let's go to the videotape.
Here it is. This is the trailer for Blockbuster.
Steven Spielberg and George Lucas.
What about strange lands and escape from the everyday? It's brilliant, George.
Before anyone knew them by name.
Who's a good boy, Indiana?
400 grand?
Let me explain.
George, that's our money.
Blockbuster.
Everybody, take cover!
Following the spectacular failures.
Sir, are you all right?
And the unexpected triumphs.
I told you, George. I told you.
A 6-part immersive audio series. Blockbuster.
There it is.
Yes.
Wow.
And it's out today.
It's
the
out
first
today.
episode.
Yeah, it's called Blockbuster, as you heard, and it's on all podcast platforms. It's a biopic.
A biopod?
A biopod, maybe. Yeah.
Biocast.
Is that a thing?
I guess it would be. Now it is. Yeah, and it follows Spielberg and Lucas and their close mutual friend who becomes who really kind of defines the whole era, John Williams.
Yes.
And there's a whole story.
You heard a little John Williams in
There's
there?
like 6 months of research that went into this, and it's a narrative. It's not documentary style; it's narrative style. So there's a story that this follows, and found some things out about John Williams that I didn't know, and that a lot of people didn't know. It's in the first episode about kind of what inadvertently led to a change in his musical thinking.
That's so great.
And that's in the first episode.
Man.
He's the maestro of maestros. Thank you, Heitor, who's also joined us for a minute. And he's actually one of those rare personalities who you don't know much about his life. So I'm looking forward, of course, to rehearing episode 1. Matt, is it the kind of thing where, like a Netflix binging show, I can download everything at once?
It will be, but no, we're releasing weekly right now. We're finishing up some of the episodes now, but this is we've tried to figure out what to call this because it's new to the podcast world a little bit. What we're doing, which is cool, also expensive, which we found out, but it's immersive audio. So we've gone through with our sound designer who worked on score, or a couple composers that wrote original music for all this, and it's just the most layered podcast that I've ever heard. That was kind of our goal, is to make something that is an experience that is, a time capsule going back to the 1970s, when all of this was just starting to happen, when Hollywood was a very different place and no one knew what blockbuster meant as a term, really. It didn't really exist as a model yet.
It's weird to think about that wasn't what you called big movies before, but now it's just like synonymous with
and there was kind of this dream. Everyone wanted the big hit, the big hit or whatever, but the model for that was kind of engineered, I guess, by Spielberg and Lucas, who were at one point best friends in as young filmmakers before they really hit it out of the park. So it's a cool story, and that was what kind of led to putting it all together.
And they shared a composer.
Yes. Steven, you'll hear that in the series, but Steven introduces George to John, and they kind of hit it off, and you'll be there for the meetings and the spotting sessions and the scoring sessions, and it's a really cool experience. And,
I got to say,
a lot of fun.
From what I heard of it, the music really stood out to me, and at first I was like, wow, this is John Williams music, but the composers that you had come on this project did an amazing job of,
Yeah.
of creating the John Williams kind of put you into that world, but it's also like a new flavor to it. And are you going to release the soundtrack as well?
Yeah, that's the plan. Ryan Taubert, who worked on score, and Benjamin Botkin, an orchestrator and composer, worked together on this, and that's what they did. They wrote some tunes. It's a theme-driven original score, so it's a lot of music, and it's fun to listen to. Also, it's hummable.
Is there an end title song? Blockbuster. We're gonna be busting some blocks.
We'll talk after this recording and see if we can
an
hook that
award-winning
up.
songwriter here.
Sounds like 5 pounds of cheese.
That's what it sounds like.
Meet the Blockbuster. Can I ask you a question? Your recommendation for listening to immersive audio, is it the kind of thing where it's best maybe in the dark alone with headphones?
In the car is great.
In the
It's
closet,
built because a
under the
lot of
clothes.
people.
What are you doing
in a
in there?
blanket
It's
tent.
Blockbuster.
I'm
Quiet.
listening to Blockbuster.
in my
in the car
blanket
is
fort.
best because we've built the stereo imaging. Peter Bavietz, who's just a great award-winning sound designer, he built this whole thing so that it sounds great in the car and on headphones. Sounds pretty good coming from a phone or something too if you're going to play it, but not as immersive, obviously. So I'd recommend headphones. I'd recommend listening in the car.
On 11. Turn it up.
Exactly.
What like where did this idea come from? You've been very quiet about this.
Yeah, we just kind of unveiled this a few days ago with the Hollywood Reporter article that came out about this, but it came from some research I was doing on a couple other projects, and some of this probably goes back to score. We had a big section in the movie about Spielberg and Williams. Not so much George Lucas directly involved, but they did kind of all have this musical, this idea of having films that are driven by music. And there was a renaissance that came about in the 70s as a result of that. And that's, I wanted to kind of explore where that came from in George and Steven. And also then I found out these guys were best buds for a while. They're flying to each other's, little movies that are all falling apart. Everything's a disaster. Jaws is famously a disaster. Star Wars is maybe an even bigger disaster. And no one has any faith in these things, It comes out, in Star Wars case, it comes out in 32 theaters on opening day, and everyone's like, oh, this is going to be, no one's going to come see this.
I think Score came out in more theaters than Star Wars.
I think it did, too.
Maybe it will have the same trajectory, too.
Yeah, the audience is getting there. It's
and if
gonna
so,
blow up.
we'll see you on our daily television show
May
on
the
Network
score
TV.
be with you.
Oh, very nice.
Nice.
Well, again, Blockbuster Episode 1
Can't
is
wait.
out now, so you can hit pause, go to your podcast app, search Blockbuster, and make
All
sure to
one word.
subscribe, because every week when they come out, it pops right into your phone.
Every Tuesday.
And you're
it's
ready to go.
Blockbuster, all one word. And you can listen along with us. And we got a whole website, social media, all that stuff if you want to follow along there, too.
Well, we're certainly going to miss you on the season.
Yeah, I'll be in here and there.
Good. Yeah, he might pop in.
Yeah.
Or maybe you come on and talk about, give us a Blockbuster update as more episodes
but
come
if
out.
we do that, we're going to need clearly a private entrance to the studio because the paparazzi, once they hear about Blockbuster and Matt becomes this kind of world-famous personality.
You don't want all the shouting and camera
Matt
bulbs
Schrader
and all that stuff
on
to be.
The Kardashians this week. So we're going to need to get a private entrance. Do you have enough sunglasses to kind of go
I could
incognito?
always use a few more.
Yeah, good.
Bigger ones.
Nice.
Okay.
Well, it's very exciting. We're happy for the big release, and best of luck with Blockbuster. And I got to tell you, I've listened to several episodes, and not just because I know them. It kicks butt. You guys should check it out.
Yeah.
We are going to take a break, and during the break, we're going to play the extended trailer if you want to get a better taste of Blockbuster. And before we get to Sparks and Shadows Studios with our guest this week, Bear McCreary, I want to make sure that we announce our winner of the First Man soundtrack giveaway, of course, signed by the composer, Justin Hurwitz. And that baby won a Golden Globe. That's a pretty cool prize.
Yeah.
Our winner is Ryan Dorrell.
Ryan Dorrell.
Congratulations,
that's nice.
Ryan.
The crowd just loves you, Ryan.
We're going to be reaching out to Ryan on Twitter. So, Ryan, if you're listening to this, look for that DM.
Congrats.
Yeah.
And make sure to follow at Score the Podcast because we'll be giving away stuff throughout the season sporadically. So you won't want to miss that.
No.
If you're not following, you can't win. And coming up after the break, we're joined by Bear McCreary inside his studios,
Yeah.
Sparks and Shadows. And we're going to take you into the break with the full trailer of Blockbuster.
Yeah.
Enjoy.
It was a word once used to describe a massive bomb. But in 1975, Blockbuster would take on an even more explosive meaning. In the middle of an economic crisis, a war in Vietnam, and worries of a nuclear showdown with the Soviet Union, arrived a game-changer in culture. On the shoulders of two soon-to-be revolutionaries, Steven Spielberg and George Lucas. Their films were pure spectacle, a momentary escape from a world falling apart. This is a true story, told in 6 episodes, about 2 rebels armed with lights, cameras, and microphones. World builders, rivals, and most of all, best friends, risking their careers, life savings, and their own health for a chance at triumph. I'm Matt Schrader, and this is a true story that transformed the movies, the mythology, and in turn, the entire world. This is Blockbuster. Subscribe for free on Apple Podcasts and all other platforms.
Hey, Score fans, it's Robert Kraft. We're back to the show in 25 seconds. If you like what you're hearing, do us a quick favor. Rate and review the show on your favorite podcast platform. It just takes a second, and it helps the show grow. Hey, thanks. We're going back to the show right now.
Welcome back to Score the Podcast. We're here inside Sparks and Shadows studio
Love that name.
for our season premiere, and one of our biggest guests thus far on the show, Bear McCreary. Welcome to the show, Bear.
Thanks for having me, you guys.
Hey, Bear, right before we kick this in, you and I had a conversation off screen. Is that where we are? Or off mic?
Off ear.
Off ear. An off year, which is what we're all having. Maybe not. You mentioned Wild Wild West. Is that it?
Indeed, I did.
And that was your first time being on a scoring stage?
That was the first time I was ever on a scoring stage watching an orchestra play music to picture.
Tell me how you ended up walking in that door and
Yeah.
Elmer was on the podium?
Elmer Bernstein is on the podium. I had, at that time, known him for several years. I ended up being, I guess, one of his last proteges. I met him when I was in high school and ended up working for him and doing some orchestration. And you know, he really took me under his wing in the last decade of his life. But that was the first time I got to go see him record something of that scale.
Was it here in
yeah,
LA?
it was right down the street at Sony.
Oh,
I mean, it
wow.
was like a mile from where we are right now.
Right,
I could walk there from my house, but at the time it was Valhalla for me. It was heaven, you know, to be able to go and experience that. And
was
watch.
it a big band?
Ginormous. I mean, It was, you know, in the old school style of having the rock and roll rhythm section record the same day with the orchestra. There's no overdubs or anything,
right.
You know. So in the main title, he had Hammond B3, bass, drum kit, guitars, and at least a 90-piece orchestra out there. And I remember this feeling that I had, which I use it to empathize with filmmakers that come and watch me work now, because I was so blown away by the first take. I mean, I just had chills. I was amazed. I was like thinking, this is it. We're done. And then Elmer gives some notes and he does it again. And I think, oh, okay, well, good to get a safety, right? Then he does it again. And as far as my ear can tell, this is done. You could put this in the movie. You could put it on a record. It's brilliant. And he does it again and again and again. And over the course of the week that I was there all week, just sitting on a couch in the back, watching him work, I started eventually to hear what he was hearing, to hear the things that he was saying to them, to pick up on the little nuances that he was dialing in. And whenever I work with a filmmaker now who has not seen an orchestra, I tell them this story so that I empathize with them. I understand that it can be seen sort of alien after a while. When you do the takes over and over again, and there's a threshold beyond which I think a non-trained musician, they're unable to hear what it is that you're trying to catch. These small intonation issues or small timing issues, things like that. But they are things that need to be ironed out for the final recording.
I absolutely love that, because it is the nature of critical listening that you continually learn. And I think we've all had that experience of not knowing enough initially in your career to know, that you think that take is cool, and either a producer or an executive who's been doing it before you says something like, the bridge, you guys weren't locked.
Yeah.
And you think,
but it sounds great. What are you talking about?
Yeah, right. That was a cool take. And then, of course, 10 years later, you're saying, let's lock this up, or you're at a tune in measure 32. That's so wonderful that I haven't thought about why the filmmakers don't understand it. But, of course, our ears are just...
Were you aware that they were sight reading at that time?
I was. I mean, at that point, I had had a lot of experience doing my own projects with very small ensembles. I mean,
but you wrote your own. I mean, I love that story. You'd written your own movie to score.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the best startup story ever. You didn't take other material. I'm going to storyboard an entire film so I have something to score. It just really shows initiative.
Well, initiative or a midlife crisis at 15.
Oh, that's great. Mid-teenage.
A quarter life crisis. Because at that time, I perhaps it's just my focus, but I had realized when I was 14 or 15 that without a doubt, this is what I want to do with my life. And if I couldn't do it, I needed to know now.
But you were if you'll forgive me, you were in the bosom of the grunge, funk, rock, Bellingham, Washington.
I knew Kurt Cobain's little brother. He went to the other high school.
For you to go to film school, and why weren't you in a garage in a plaid shirt at that moment? I'd like to know.
This is funny, because you are right. I grew up in the golden age of grunge in the Pacific Northwest. I listened only to film music. I don't mean that I listened mostly. I listened only to film music. I did not listen to anything with a guitar, bass, or drum kit at all until I was 14.
How does that even happen where you're living?
That's so cool.
It's just what I grew up being obsessed about. So for me, I didn't even know who Kurt Cobain was. It was Jerry Goldsmith.
Yeah.
And then what happened was there were two things. And they're still my passions today. I realized that my favorite film composer, Danny Elfman, had a band. So I was like, I'm going to check out these Oingo Boingo records. And at first, when I remember the first time I got Boingo, the 94 record, which I still adore, and it starts off with these ominous trombones, and I'm like, oh, awesome, this sounds like Batman. And then the band comes in, and I was like, wait, what? This is a band? And it took me a minute to wrap my head around. And the other one that did it for me was Queen's songs in Highlander, actually. And that's when I went what's up with this band? And it was Queen and Oingo Boingo that actually kind of broke the door open, and I went, oh, there's pop music that I like. That's
it is so bass backwards. It's unbelievable.
Isn't it crazy?
Every other composer on the planet is listening to bands and then kind of finds film music.
So what's funny, right? When I say
you go the other way,
I've played in rock bands. I played. My brother and I did a Freddie Mercury tribute show a couple of years ago. When Johnny Vatos reunited Oingo Boingo, my brother is the lead singer. I was the MD. So I've played with all the Boingo guys.
Wow.
But you're right. It is completely backwards because I was interested only in film music, and it was sort of like a byproduct of that I started listening to anything else. Now, of course, to circle back to your point, right? Had I been paying attention at the time, I mean, it's like I could have gotten in a car with my buddies and driven 50 miles and seen Nirvana play. And only now looking back, and especially as my tastes in rock and roll have evolved, I adore music from the time that I was in high school, but it's definitely not nostalgia because I wasn't listening to it in high school.
Are your parents musicians? What drew you to film music?
There's a lot of music in my family. My grandparents on my dad's side were professional music teachers. My mom played a lot of music for me, but there were no professional like musicians in my family in any sort of immediate sense.
Because normally a kid that's drawn to classical music or the orchestra has like the parent that says you must do your
I surprised my
piano
parents.
lessons.
I remember watching some movie when I was in it was probably Beetlejuice. It was like I was watching it on video with my mom. Probably would have been like, at that point 88, 89, and it had just started. And I remember this look on my mom's face because I turned and I looked at her in the first 10 seconds of the movie and I go, Danny Elfman wrote this music. And as the credit came up 30 seconds later, I remember her looking at me like, what is wrong with you? How did you know that? And it doesn't seem like that big a deal to me now, but as I've become a parent and I've started watching this evolve in my own daughter, you realize like that is a person who's really paying attention, especially in the era before IMDb. You can't look it up. You just need to have remembered that name from the last time you saw a movie.
Right.
And that was me when I was growing up. I would go see a movie. I saw The Shadow 4 nights in a row. Okay, it took me actually it was like the fourth night that I realized I didn't like the movie. I just loved the Goldsmith score.
Oh, wow.
And I would walk out of the theater and my friends are like, that was okay. And I'm like, you guys, did you hear that synth thing that Jerry Goldsmith did in the beginning? And then the way he like used the villain theme at the end, but it was like, I'm going on and on and on, and they don't even know what I'm talking about,
But that's the 10,000 hours. I mean, you're the perfect example of that Malcolm Gladwell thing where you were into it and focused in a way that it's hard to explain to non-composers. There's not a lot of people that decide at like 26 years old, hey,
yeah.
Which a lot of rock stars do these days. They
Yes.
say, well, this isn't working out for me. I mean, the good news for you is here you've had this magnificent career and you're having one. If you had gone the grunge route, you'd be maybe upstairs in Reseda in a fifth floor walk-up.
Probably.
Waiting for the phone to ring.
In many ways.
What an amazing thing.
Yeah, I was I was and remain sort of obsessed with it. It's all I've ever wanted to do. When I was 5, I knew it was pretty much what I wanted to do. And when I was 14 is when I sort of took everything else and went like, yeah, I'm not doing that. It's definitely this.
What was it at 5? Do you remember?
I'll tell you another story. So when I was 5, I saw Back to the Future, and I made my mom go back, bring me again. This time I had a little Fisher-Price cassette recorder because I didn't know you could buy a soundtrack, and I held it up to record the music. And as the audience were like laughing at the movie, I would be scowling because I'm thinking, no, stop.
Quiet.
Be quiet. I want to hear this. And then the dialogue would get in the way, but I would then I would go home and listen to the cassette tape that I had made of this music because I loved it so much. And then it was about that time that I discovered at a record store you could see a soundtrack which didn't have that pesky dialogue. His annoying sound effects are gone.
That terrible movie attached to it.
Have you had the opportunity to say to Danny or to Silvestri, I'm certain to Elmer, that thank you, or you were a big part of it?
To varying degrees, I have. And I know they hear that a lot. Elmer, I think, obviously more than anybody else, I really got to know him. And he knows what that meant to me. And in many ways, his influence on me is far more profound on a personal level than on a musical level.
That's great.
I've met Danny Elfman a few times. I don't know if I've communicated to him what his music means to me.
Was it a fanboy moment, or did you kind of just play it cool?
I played it cool, but I mean, he knows, man. You know, he knows. No, I'll tell you a funny story, right? So I snuck past security at the USC Film School because Basil Polidorus was speaking at a screening. Indeed. He was speaking at a screening of Starship Troopers. And it was for film students only, and I'm a music student. And I waited till the movie was halfway done and could see like one of the like people that were taking the tickets went to the bathroom, and I snuck in and stood in the back so I could go up and talk to him. And then A couple years later, he was doing this. He was part of this big event down in Costa Mesa where they were getting a bunch of film composers together. Elmer was there, and they were recruiting a choir from USC, and he was going to conduct Red October. Now, I have never sung in a choir, but I joined that choir because I was like, Basil's going to
lemon tea or getting
exactly. And of course, then I end up singing. I'm on the first tenor part, which is like ludicrously high, and it turns out I could kind of do it. But it gave me a second chance to go up to Basil and say, hey, look, I got to tell you, only reason I'm even doing this is just to shake your hand and say thank you for everything you've done. I was able to. I met Jerry Goldsmith. His service was when he passed away was open to the public, and I was there. And I just think, I'll be able to tell my grandkids one day, like, yeah,
I love this. You're carrying the message in many ways. You are a bridge between just Elmer and Jerry. Even for those of you that can't see, which is everyone listening to the podcast, there are the names of some of our greatest composers here in Bear's studio, identifying each room.
Yeah, all my rooms
that have passed.
They're named after the composers that have passed.
With Shirley Walker,
Jerry Goldsmith, Elmer Bernstein,
Bernard Herrmann, Prokofiev,
Herrmann.
and in the next studio we'll have to make room for a James Horner room. Sadly,
you're right.
But I do feel this very profound connection to the past, to all the people that came before me and inspired me. And as we were talking before this, I was invited at a very early point in my career. Shirley Walker's family invited me to her memorial at the Warner Brothers stage. And I just felt this profound sense of sadness in that she was gone. But I also thought, what an honor to be there, to see all these people that she worked with. And I just felt I was I want to say a fan, although I feel like I've done more than a typical fan to honor her legacy, because I've dedicated records to her and I've spoken very publicly about how much she's influenced me. And that's sort of amazing to me when I think that Elmer's teacher was Aaron Copland, and he taught me. I mean, that
is one of the greatest traditions in teaching, which is that you are the student of someone who had a great teacher, so you are indirectly Aaron Copland.
Can we talk about that a little bit?
Sure.
Your bio mentioned that you met Elmer on a boat dock. Can you explain?
There's a karmic connection here that's fabulous.
I grew up in Bellingham, Washington.
Right.
And
home of great composers. That's what they say, that they all spend their time.
It's the Vienna of the Pacific Northwest. There is no entertainment industry there to speak of. And I was when I was a junior in high school, I was voted because of my GPA, I was like the Rotary Club Student of the Month, some random month, which is a thing you get to stick on your resume.
Yep.
And so I went to the Rotary Club, and they did a little presentation. This is Bear McCreary. He wants to study film music. He's thinking about going to USC, which in the very cursory sort of research I had done, where does one go? That was the first place that came up. And after what was a very dry sort of ceremony, even as a high schooler, I was like, please take me back to English class. This is too boring. This guy comes up to me, introduces himself. His name is Joe Coons. He and his wife get a signed CD to this day. But he comes up to me and he says, I've got a friend who works in the business, because I run the local boat association, and he keeps a boat here. And I'm, even then, you guys, I'm not kidding. Like I had this kind of attitude, because I was like, I know it's going to be somebody who writes like the local weather report theme jingle, or it's going to be someone who does like a soap opera out of Seattle, or like writes the music for Bill Nye, or like any of these things that are like kind of cool, but like not where I want to be.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, sure, man, whatever. And he goes, have you heard of Elmer Bernstein? Okay. My jaw hits the floor, right? I mean, Elmer's music is profoundly important to me at this point in my life. And I go, yeah, I have. So I made a cassette tape of some of the stuff that I had been working on at that time, which included some music that I'd done for my high school jazz band, some random pieces I'd written, and cues from this imaginary movie that I was working on at that point. I was about 30 pages in, I'd written about 25 minutes of music. Most of this is realized on my Yamaha PSR 510 consumer crappy keyboard.
Did it have different sounds or just...
No, it did.
Could you overdub?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, so you could make multi-track.
And in fact, I had just gotten, at the time, it blew my mind, with, it was like Windows 3 something, it was a program
3.1 or something?
Yes,
Yeah.
it was a program called Master Tracks,
Right
which
on.
actually allowed, it as primitive as it was, it's the same thing we use today.
Sure.
In principle. And I
Just
also
less RAM.
Exactly. Well, there was no RAM. It's MIDI only, and so the files are like, you could fit my entire film score on a floppy disk. For live audio, I used a Tascam 4-track.
Right on.
And I would, the tricks of just layering and layering and layering to get live players. I'd have my friends come over into my bedroom and record stuff. I got a little effects processor. It was extremely primitive. Now, with all that said, Joe sent this to Elmer. And I would find out later, Elmer would get sent tapes all the time. They would go straight in the trash.
Sure.
He does not listen to them. He's busy. And, but from Joe...
Joe had the hookup, though.
Joe said, you got to check this guy out. And clearly he and Joe were social, and he goes, sure. And he agreed to meet with me. So the next time he came up on his boat, which, guys, just think about the cosmic significance here. Every summer, Elmer would sail up to Alaska and back. So he kept his boat in the furthest north port town on the Pacific in America. That's Bellingham, Washington. And the guy who runs the boat club was in the Rotary Club,
member.
With the day that I did the thing. I met Elmer, and I'll never forget that day. I mean, my mom went and got me a brand new suit that barely fit, and you could tell I'd never worn it before. And Elmer comes to the door in his, he always wore these like pig sweaters and like moccasins, and I remember he kind of laughed. I mean, he laughed at me when he saw me, and there was some comment of like, well, once you get to Hollywood, you don't need to dress up. But I mean, I think also, and he said to me like that it was a thing he said constantly about my music later on. He said it just had a lot of personality. He said it had a lot of personality. And then he said, have you studied harmony? No. Theory? No. Counterpoint? No. Music history? No. Orchestration? No. I take piano lessons. I'm in my high school jazz band, and I play, and I'm like, I've got a couple like rock bands with my friends, and I just do this all the time. And what was interesting is that he basically said, look, you got to be this high to get on the ride. Okay, you got to know these things. Now, here's another funny thing, right? Robert, you know this better than anybody. He was wrong. He was wrong because this was 1996. Things were changing.
Yeah.
If I had met with Hans Zimmer, would Hans Zimmer have told me I need to know all that stuff?
The exact opposite.
Probably
the exact opposite. But this is in line with, and I liked Hans's music, and obviously my hero is Danny Elfman. He's emerging from this new school. But Jerry Goldsmith, John Williams, Elmer Bernstein, Bernard Herrmann, Rota, these are my heroes. So I get to meet one of my heroes who says, look, in order to be like me, you have to know all these things. So I said, okay, I'm going to go learn all those things. And I applied to the USC Music School. Elmer wrote me a letter.
To Thornton?
It wasn't even Thornton yet. It became Thornton when I was there.
And was there a film music track?
Yes, there was. And this, it historically is very complicated because at that time, they let in 4 undergrads a year, and it was a graduate program. So it was, in short, I applied for that, and I eventually got in. But it meant that what you do is you take an altered version of the regular composition program, and then your last year, you are one of the 4 undergrads that take this graduate certificate as an undergrad. Long story short, I would end up doing that, getting a full degree in composition. I took all the classes and a minor in recording arts, and I stayed there 5 years.
And Elmer was instrumental in the USC application, or did he?
Elmer, I believe, helped immensely getting me into the music school.
Yeah.
I still had to get into the school on my own, and I had to get at least a half tuition scholarship, or this is a non-starter. And I was able to do those with the help of my mom, doing everything that you got to do to fill out the forms and present it. And Elmer was not able to help with that.
I was going to say, so fast forward, Battlestar Galactica, how do you get brought onto this project? And I know that this was right around the time that we lost Elmer.
Yes. Well, I'll tell you, so I worked for Elmer off and on during the last sort of decade of his life. I organized at his Pearl Street office all of the boxes of scores that are now in the USC collection. They were completely loose. I'll go back to that story later. That's a good story. I house sat his dogs up at his estate in Santa Barbara when he was gone one summer, and he gave me a movie to orchestrate while I'm there. Like, hey, do you want to come, just like give the dogs their medicine, and here's an old movie from the 60s that was lost, and I'm going to re-record it.
Oh,
and in the last session in his life, he re-recorded it, Kings of the Sun, this old Yul Brynner movie. But I mean, imagine as a young composer having somebody like Elmer Bernstein say, stay in my house. Here are my handwritten pencil sketches. I want you to extract from this the orchestral score, and when I come back, I'll sit down and tell you what you did wrong.
Oh, my God.
There's some homework.
I mean, really. And I'll pay you for it. I mean, it was just, it was amazing.
Wow.
But anyway, the reason I bring all that up is I learned, as I said before, a lot about life. He was a beacon for me musically, but especially personally. I was really struggling at the time, wondering, if musicians and artists had to be miserable, if they had to die young. I mean, I was haunted by learning about the fates of Gershwin and Ravel and Beethoven and Janis Joplin and Kurt Cobain when that happened. I mean, you go on and on and on, and musicians are like a litany of tragedies.
Yes. 27 Club.
Indeed. Then I meet Elmer, who at that time in his mid-70s, he is revered by his peers. He has a wonderful family. He has everything that I think that's what I want to be when I'm in my 70s. That it's possible, So he had this profound impact on me. There is one thing that I can tell you I did not learn from him at all, which is, what is an emerging film composer in 2001 going to face when they enter the business? Because Elmer's not dealing with any of that. Not at all. I mean, he's making movies with Martin Scorsese, and he's also very proudly doing it his way, more so than almost anyone else could. And as you guys probably know, he had more music thrown out than any composer of his stature.
Know.
It's astonishing in the 90s how many times his music was tossed out. And it was tossed out for one reason. He wouldn't do mock-ups. You could hire him.
Oh, so they'd hear it for the first time.
Exactly. But anybody else that tried that at his age, it was like him, John Williams, and Jerry Goldsmith were the only ones famous enough.
He had earned that ability.
He'd earned it.
Yeah.
But it also means he also was confident enough to say, look, this is how I do things, and I'm not going to change because of the winds of technology are moving in this direction. You can hire me and you can fire me, but I'm not going to change how it's done.
Yep.
All right. But as a young adult, as a teenager watching this, I knew it's like, that's not going to be me.
Good. Because I was thinking,
what I mean?
It'd be nice if on your first score you walked in and said, hey man,
you can hire me and fire me.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, well, guess which one they would choose.
Right. This is the way the queue goes.
All right, so long story short, right? When I get out of college, I end up assisting a composer named Richard Gibbs, who is very much more a typical of a working guy at this time. And that's really where I learned a lot about the gear, dealing with music editors, dealing with spotting sessions, just like the minutia of how stuff gets done on a practical level, how the business actually works when you're not Elmer Bernstein.
Right.
So that was a long-winded way, Kenny, of getting to your question.
No problem. Richard
Gibbs is hired to score the Battlestar Galactica miniseries. I write additional music on that. And when it goes to series, Richard is brought on for a couple episodes, and then he left to go do other features. And the producers, in a pinch, let me do one episode while they looked for somebody else. That one episode turned into 2, turned into 75 hours.
Yeah.
Wow.
And let me just wrap this story up, because I think they are related. And we can talk about Battlestar and all that other stuff, but I love talking about this. So one of the reasons that I work for Richard is that Elmer didn't have as much stuff going on at that time, and there was a year when I didn't really talk with him all that much, and I was I was young and very naive, and also I just dove right into working on all these movies and TV shows with Richard. It was awesome, you know. I just wasn't paying attention, and Elmer knew that I was writing additional music on this miniseries, Battlestar Galactica. And then in the summer of 2004, he called me up about something. I don't even remember what. But we spoke, and he asked how my mom was. And at that exact time, I had done 2 episodes of Battlestar working with Richard. Richard had just left. And it was looking like they were going to let me come in and spot the 3rd episode produced, which happens to be, for any Battlestar fans out there, the first episode of the show, because we dubbed out of order. The first episode is called 33. It's a good one. So it was about to be official, you know, like that. It was like, I'm going to get my name on at least one episode of this show. But I didn't want to jinx it, you know. So I didn't tell him. I didn't tell him that this was looking very likely. So a couple of days later, it ends up happening. We spot the show, and the next day I get up and I shut off my phone. I shut off my all my email and everything, and I go, look, today's the day, man. This is the day, the first day I'm going to write music that's going to go out into the world with my name on it. It's on a TV show that I know in my heart of hearts is going to change things. You know, I just know this is it. And I wrote a cue that's on the soundtrack album called The Olympic Carrier. In the first episode, it's this big dramatic moment, this big 6-minute sequence. Spent all day on it. I'm in heaven. So I turn my phone back on at like 7 o'clock at night. I have 15 voicemails because Elmer Bernstein passed away that day.
Oh, man.
That's really incredible.
Yeah. So I never got to tell him. And
he knows.
I like to think that, you know, and I still keep in touch with his family. I was just talking with his daughter, Emily, the other day, and, you know, and his widow and his former assistants, everybody, you know, and his son, Peter, who's wonderful.
Peter it's curious how, first of all, it's an amazing story, and also kind of expresses the amount of magic that's around your Elmer Bernstein relationship in every way.
Truly.
There's nothing about it that isn't absolutely out of a storybook.
I know. And it's something
from Bellingham to Battlestar.
It's kind of poetic, too, because it was like the moment that you were pushing out into this world of film music and you were ready, and his job was done or something.
It's the sort of thing that if you read it in a script, you'd say to the writer, like, come on, man.
Yeah, it's too corny. Can't do that.
But, you know,
God.
It had a profound impact on me. And obviously one of the other many lessons that I've learned from then is don't withhold good news. Just don't worry about jinxing it. If you got something to share, just share
takeaway.
it.
And I didn't know how this story ended. And I was going forward, anticipating all the errors that I've made of not sharing something, and then turning out I should have shared it because, you know, well, they knew somebody else who was up for the gig, and if they'd known that you were doing it, and I wish you'd told me, and all those other things, I never anticipated that the end was, wow, that one person that would be the proudest.
Yeah.
Is that something you think about all the time?
Yeah.
Just not him.
I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think it's beautiful that your phone was off in a way so that you just think if
my phone was on, it wouldn't have kept him alive. I just wouldn't have written my music that day.
And,
you know,
who knows if you would have written the best music, because you might have been sad, distracted, phone ringing.
I know.
There was some poetry to all of it.
Wow. And in many ways, it you know, what became of that music that I wrote was beyond even my wildest dreams. I mean, that show opened doors for me in ways
it was Elmer sprinkling fairy dust on all of it. It really was. I think the reason, just for composer fans out there, that I asked way back the size of the band is that I learned that Elmer's score on Mockingbird, I think, is 21 pieces.
It's small.
And for, I always thought, well, you need 90 pieces, or you need a big band. You need a choir in the back. Plus, you're going to have to do a taiko drum overdub to make things really rock. 21 pieces, nailed it.
Yeah.
And he was the author of one of those kinds of scores. Jerry, too, with Chinatown.
Yeah.
Where you could make strange, it always amazed me. The masters could come in and configure strange size
absolutely
bands and make it work.
We're actually going to touch on that in the next block. We're going to take a quick break.
Thank you.
Get some Kleenex, take a breather.
Yeah.
Man, that's kind of...
More with Bear McCreary when we come back.
Thanks.
Hey, Score fans, it's Kenny Holmes. We're back to the show in just a second. Just a quick reminder, be sure to follow us on Twitter @ScoreThePodcast. We post a lot of behind-the-scenes videos, and we'll also keep you up to date on who our next guest is. So make sure to go over and follow us now. Back to the show. Welcome back to Sparks and Shadows.
I'm having such a good time today. I think one cautionary tale was shared in the beginning of this, which is for all of you perspiring composers out there. Bear has told us a story about going to the Rotary Club. And for all of your hard work, just remember, nothing replaces great luck and timing.
Yeah, go check in with your harbor master nearby.
Just
make sure they don't know John Williams or something.
It's just writ large how, and I can't imagine any career, including some of those at this table, that being at Whole Foods one afternoon at the right time or going to some favorite park to walk your dog runs you into somebody who says, hey, man, it's good to see you. And as they say in Hollywood, shit happens. But I think the best one I've heard in a while is at the Harbor Master in Bellingham, Washington.
We didn't even get to do your proper introduction because since the Harbor Master, you've gone on to do amazing work. He's an Emmy-winning composer for shows like The Walking Dead, Outlander, Battlestar Galactica, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Black Sails, which we feature your theme in the Score documentary that you're playing on the hurdy-gurdy there. Also, a big movie on the way, Godzilla, King of the Monsters.
Huge.
He did 10 Cloverfield Lane, and then Happy Death Day, and To You in a sequel. Yep. I want to talk to you about God of War, though.
Yeah.
You're coming off a huge year. In fact, we were trying to get you on the podcast last year, and I know you were right in the middle of God of War. One of the biggest video games of all time, highest rated at that.
It's up there. Yeah.
It has a very interesting sound. It's a big orchestral Nordic instruments and the really prominent deep male choir.
Yeah.
I think I have a clip here. What goes into researching a score like this? Because there's a lot of historical elements to it. Even the lyrics are written in Old Norse.
Yeah.
Is McCreary a Norse name? Are you a Viking at heart?
No, it's it is Scotch-Irish.
Yeah, okay. So that's...
what's your starting point? They bring you into this meeting. I read a little bit about your meeting.
Yeah.
They didn't quite tell you what you were doing, and immediately you're like, is this a new God of War?
Yeah, the signs were there, especially when they asked about choirs and percussion and then mythology. But, doing extensive research is what's fun for me. I am drawn to projects that will force me to learn something I don't know already. So I knew nothing about taiko drums when I started Battlestar Galactica. I knew nothing about Nordic folk music when I started God of War. So I just do a deep dive. I research the way the music is used. I obviously listen to tons of it. I try to draw from it some essence that I can preserve, and I want to do that honorably. Yet at the same time, it's inevitable that all the rules I'm learning are up to be broken.
Yeah.
If the dramatic needs require it. So in the case of God of War, it was actually, I think the biggest challenge for me was I score a show called Outlander, where I get to indulge all of my fantasies of using bagpipes and Scottish music.
Right on.
Which I love. I love it. What's interesting about Nordic folk music is that that's where a lot of that stuff comes from.
Because there's a relationship between...
A direct relationship.
Yeah.
And what it means is to the casual listener, something that is purely Nordic can really feel like it's Celtic.
Yeah.
And I wanted to avoid that at all costs, partly just to prevent confusion, but also personally, I've explored that sound so much. So I was looking for ways of differentiating from some of the stuff that became more Celtic in the way it signified where it was coming from. And so I was listening to some of the more unusual instruments, the Hardanger fiddle or the nickel harpa, which is this really cool instrument that did not translate at all into any sort of Western or Celtic
These
version.
are Nordic instruments?
Yeah.
The Hardanger fiddle?
The Hardanger fiddle is essentially like a violin with a built-in reverb that comes from these resonating strings.
Yeah.
And to be fair, like when it's recorded, it really does. It does sound a lot like a regular violin. The nickel harpa is like an alien. I love it. It's
is that a harp?
No, it's like a hurdy-gurdy. It's like this sort of boxed thing with all these strings, and you bow it, and it has these sort of keys to play. It's very strange.
Do they exist in the world? You have to find one or not?
I spent some time trying to find a player that specializes in one, and couldn't find the right fit. I found players that could read that weren't amazing, and I found players that could improvise like crazy and couldn't read at all. What I ended up doing is finding a player that plays a lot of different ethnic and Renaissance instruments, and I went and bought a nickel harpa, gave it to him, and said, learn how to play this.
Perfect. Yeah.
And he it was like a dream come true. Like he almost cried. He loves nickel harpa and had always wanted to play one.
Did you travel?
I did. I did. We recorded in Iceland. We recorded in London. One of the things that was most amazing, right? The way to... It's fun to nerd out about nickel harpa and Hardanger fiddle and stuff like that. But to really immediately take you to the music of a culture, you have to use the voice. Nothing moves as quickly to tell an audience you're here as a voice. So I wanted to work with choirs and singers in Iceland, and the producers at Sony, especially Pete Scaturo, were really open to this and were pushing this idea, which was amazing because I'm saying, hey, yeah, we could record it here or in London, but like, let's go to Iceland and do it for real. What ended up happening was that we recorded text that was in Old Norse, and we found out that the Icelandic language is so isolated that an Icelandic speaker can read Old Norse and pronounce it correctly. Now, what that means, think about it, right? It means if you go to London and you want them to sing in Old Norse, you got to spend 10 minutes at the top of every queue with a language specialist teaching them syllable by syllable how it speaks.
Phonetic.
I've done this.
Yeah.
It takes forever. You go to Iceland, they can just read it. And we found this choir called Schola Cantorum, which had never recorded on a film score or a game score before. They're like very well known in Iceland, this sort of semi-official national choir, and they had this really unique sound. You can hear in the pronunciation the way the vowels and the consonants work. This is not your typical kind of large, muscular Latin choir. It had there were 28 singers. It was small, like we were talking about with Elmer.
Yeah.
And I raised a flag at the beginning. I was like, can this be done with 20? I mean, at 28 session singers, I know what that sounds like because it's SATB. It means you got a handful of people on each part.
Yep.
But that's their sound, and it was incredible. They just pierced. It was like a scalpel cutting through the mix. You know.
Just out of curiosity, and forgive me, all Icelandic geniuses like Jonesy and Bjork, recording facilities. In Reykjavik?
Yes, we were
big studios.
It wasn't a big studio.
Contemporary gear.
Yeah, it was all up to date with that stuff. Bjork had a bunch of posters on the wall, which I was starstruck.
Good.
They certainly don't have like a gigantic scoring stage.
Right.
And again, had I insisted on we need 80 singers, well, when we wouldn't have even had a place to put them, and it wouldn't have been the sound.
It was the sound,
you know. And so we worked with them, some other soloists, and the extreme vocal register that you talked about, those guys singing the low C, which is nearly an octave.
Basically, Robert Kraft.
Hello, I am a Viking.
Next time, I'm just going to get you. Yeah, that was sort of my. That was me sort of pushing the range of what I thought was possible, just to capture the character. You know, like that isn't a traditional Icelandic way of singing, but it sure sounds like our main guy.
And I think my question about the gear was, did you bring sessions there that you overdubbed choirs onto? And
yes, well, I love getting technical.
Me too.
We recorded orchestra and percussion in London.
Yeah.
Then we went to Iceland and recorded choirs at the same time that we remoted in additional choirs from Prague and additional choirs from London that I'm monitoring in Iceland.
This is God of tech.
It is, man. It is amazing, of course, what is possible now.
But look, it was worth it.
It was. And I think the score benefits from this. It's been recorded all over Europe, and it just has a massive sound, and especially for a game. I mean, again, just to get a little technical, because a game score has to sound better than a film score. It sounds sacrilegious, right?
I'm wondering why.
Here's why. Any layer inside your mix can be pulled out and isolated, and it's a cue now. Is there, on a film, is there click bleed on your strings? It'll be fine because you're putting the choir on top. No. Every part of it has to be pure enough to stand on its own, because I wrote about 6 hours of music, which is a lot, but the game experience is anywhere from 20 to 40 hours. So there's this spaghettification. It stretches out, you know?
Yep.
And so you have to make sure every layer has to be perfect, has to essentially be its own finished product.
Yeah.
So, you know, in the obviously in the digital era, this is possible, you know, to be able to get that
when
kind of
you were
control.
scoring it, were you getting asked about doing TV and films shows at the same time, and you have to actually say, I'm on a video game now? Is there any conflict career-wise to, I can't take, oh man, there's this movie I'd love to do, but I actually have to deliver God of War, or there's a series coming up, I'm perfect for it, and they want me, I can't do it. Did it happen?
That's not in my philosophy, Robert.
Oh, nice.
That is
you're on what you're on?
I am on what I'm on, and I find
producers take note. You have a focused composer here.
If I want to do something, I will find a way to do it.
Nice.
So while I was there, I had a portable rig, and I scored a Netflix movie.
Nice.
When I was there, I had support from my team here who were doing additional cues. Mm-hmm. I'm listening to cues. I'm writing the themes, doing the big sequences while I'm conducting God of War. Some TV stuff was going. I mean, I just find a way to make it work.
Yeah, that's great.
You know, because I love what I'm doing. I'm inspired by what I'm doing, and it would drive me nuts to think that I'd have to pass on a show like Walking Dead or even a little movie like Happy Death Day, because it's like, well, I don't have the perfect schedule opening. I mean, I never have that. I'm
sure.
There is not a time that I'm not doing like two things.
So when you're doing day, that
and sometimes a little movie turns into a big movie.
Of course,
Happy Death Day killed it.
Yeah, exactly. Happy Death Day was a blast.
But it's interesting to have this story bookend a day that you turned the phone off to write a cue for one show, and to think on that day, if somebody tapped you on the shoulder, say there's going to be a moment in 15 years where you're going to be traveling to London, Iceland, with Prague coming in and show over here, you'd say, oh man, let me just get to the end of today.
Totally. Let me tell you, when I was doing Battlestar Gallactica, it was a two-man team. It was me and an engineer. And when I say it was me and an engineer, it means if it wasn't engineering, I did it. So I wrote for 5 days. I orchestrated for the 6th day. I taped the parts and put them out on the stand. Even if we were at Warner Brothers, I taped them and put them out on the stand. Me and my brother would stay up all night, put on a TV show, and just tape the parts. You know, printed them on my printer at my house.
Audience members, taping the parts does not mean recording as in taping. It means taking out
scotch taping it
and scotch taping pages.
So I got offered a second show. It was called Eureka. It was a lighthearted comedy on the Sci-Fi Channel, and I thought, this is beyond impossible. This is beyond impossible. And it was Elmer's voice in the back of my mind that made me take it. He said a thing that in many ways, I still think about where he always said getting your first gig is easy. It's the second gig that's hard. And that was echoing in my mind when Battlestar took off and my music was being recognized, and I was 25. It was a crazy time. Fantastic. But I had this nagging feeling in the back of my head, like, yeah, but remember what Elmer said, it's the second gig. This could be it for you, man. Like, I was prepared. I could be an assistant again. If Battlestar doesn't get picked up in season 3, I'm running demo CDs again.
Yeah.
Now, with that said, it seemed impossible. And so it forced me, maybe I could get some help with the taping and the orchestrating. And so I go, okay, I'll take on a second show. And like 2 weeks later, I get a third show. Ooh. Terminator, the Sarah Connor Chronicles on Fox.
Oh, yeah.
It's Terminator. It's a great show. It's on a major network. I was suddenly like, I was having consternation about 2 shows like 2 weeks ago. And that was really, I think, where I just fully changed and went like, am I going to get a second chance to write music in the Terminator universe? No, you got to do this.
Just out of curiosity, was this in a Brad Fiedel scoring universe, or had they moved on in Terminator?
So here's yes and no. And it's funny because among all, I've talked a lot about the composers that I've connected with and reached out to and bonded with. I ended up getting in touch with Brad because I adored his score for both the
1
first
and 2?
1 and 2.
Yeah.
And I got hired on this show, and essentially, like, the showrunner really wanted to make a continuation of Terminator 2 stylistically, and I think he did. Those of you listening, I'm sure none of you saw Terminator, the Sarah Connor Chronicles. Go check it out. Lena Headey from Game of Thrones is in it as Sarah Connor. You can tell it was on Fox in 2009. There's some inevitable things that just you had to do at that time. It was ahead of its time. It was before the idea that you can take a dark, gritty sci-fi story and tell a serial drama. That was alien still, even though now it's such a no-brainer now, right? Anyway, through legal stuff that's super boring, even though it comes as a surprise to fans that you can get a license, especially on the Terminator franchise, where the rights are just so Byzantine. You can have the characters, you can have the name, you can have the logo and the creature designs. That doesn't mean you own the music. It's all got chopped up.
Sure.
So they were able to license for the main title the 5 notes. Ba-bum, bum, ba-bum. That was it. Everything else... And what's funny is I wanted to just take Brad's score and extrapolate it. So I was forced into doing something that was more my own, but it was very much in that style. I mean, and again, talk about things that I knew nothing about. I was not the synth score guy like that. I had just come off of Battlestar, which was all taiko drums. And so I took a crash course in like analog synths and what were the sounds he was using. And I reached out to him and we've corresponded a lot. I mean,
nice. It also makes me wonder, in 2009, on a Fox network, and this is a deep dive into how focused I was.
Yeah.
I probably signed your check. And I have no memory of that show. How long was it?
It went on 2 years. Okay, only 2 years.
For 2 years.
It debuted after the Super Bowl to astonishing numbers.
Right.
It was like 18 million people watched the pilot. And then, of course, because 18 million people watched the pilot, it just dropped from there. And the show was very dark. I mean, in hindsight, it's like why Fox would have thought this could.
Probably now it would be on the money. I want to ask a completely tangential question. 9 or 10 years later, are you far more fluid with synths?
Yes, more for sure. I mean, I definitely have.
It's an unfair question. Do you use synths in a different way as a result of that?
No. It's reasonable, but I mean, I would describe. I mean, I'm 10 years later. I'm better at everything, Robert. I mean, it's like my percussion sounds better. My orchestration sounds better.
Yeah.
My understanding of where instruments in the orchestra sound the way I want them to is good. Like it's the difference between something that sounds good and something that doesn't. You're
like Elmer in the soundstage going, "Do it again, do it again."
Well, you learn
exactly.
Also. How else do you learn?
And I've been fortunate to take on projects that have forced me to get better at these different styles. And that's a blast, So yeah, I mean, I'm definitely more familiar with synths and sampling and all that stuff in the same way that I've just gotten better at everything else.
Yeah.
But it is funny. You think, right, like the skill that I had when I started Battlestar Galactica, I had not scored anything except student films. Dozens of them, but that's all my qualifications on paper were none. I mean, they were insane to let me do this. And the only qualification I had is the obsessive amount of enthusiasm for doing this since I was 5, which does eventually stack up.
Yes.
That even the dozens of student films that I had done with small orchestras.
Yes.
The last one I did for director John M. Chu, who just did Crazy Rich Asians this year. We were college buddies, and I did a musical with him that we had a 70-piece orchestra.
Will you do Crazy Rich Asians too?
No, it's all Brian Tyler on that one. It's amazing what he's done.
Yeah.
But John actually, right, talk about, Providence, right? Like the first studio movie I ever did was Step Up 3D at Disney.
Oh,
for
wow.
John.
Yeah.
Had I done a hip hop dancing romantic comedy before? No.
That's a really
you know what I mean?
scary fact of life in the entertainment business is that you get hired for things that you are
I was gonna
enthusiastic about and you have no clue. Once, I think all of us have walked out of the room thinking they definitely just hired the wrong guy by asking me to do this gig.
If we hit play on your iPod right now, what plays? What is Bear McCreary listening to?
There's two categories, right? So I will either listen to I make playlists of scores that inspire me in the style of the thing that I'm working on at the moment. So I need to fill the tanks. I just finished a movie for McG.
Yeah.
For Netflix that called Rim of the World, and it is absolutely in a 1980s Jerry Goldsmith, John Williams, Dave Grusin style.
Perfect.
So I've been listening to Indiana Jones, Explorers, The Burbs, Gremlins, Goonies. I mean, and just fill the tanks, man.
Dave Grusin's
fill the
thing
tanks,
mentioned. Yeah.
And I love that stuff.
Yeah.
The other side, when I want to empty the tanks, is all metal. I've been listening to System of a Down. I listen to Rage Against the Machine. I just listen just to be like, this. I need to clear my head.
Interesting.
So it's usually one or the other. Yeah.
It's funny because first of all, Rage Against the Machine came up yesterday in a big way. I've known Tom Morello for a long time.
That's funny.
This is news to me.
Oh yeah. Tom and I go way back, but it's just he's actually dabbled in film music and played guitar on.
Well, you mentioned those guys that come out of a band. I mean, I'm friends with Serge Tankian from System, and he's scoring a lot of stuff now.
He did a documentary recently, and it made me think. Actually, when you're talking about Norse music, did you ever get into Scandinavian death metal? Because that you would think that for God of War, let's get a guy that really understands this kind of.
Totally. No, I love that stuff. Yeah. And in fact, I mean, when I was in Reykjavik, I downloaded a bunch of the Icelandic metal bands. I just kind of like Googled, and I just walked around with my earbuds, just blasting.
That's amazing.
Just taking it in.
That's what I would do in my spare time. Yeah. And I found this band that I adore called Ham, HAM, all capital letters, that are amazing. I mean,
metal.
It's like Icelandic death metal. They have two singers, right? This is what makes them cool. I'm going to find these guys. I'm going to work with them.
Nice.
They have two singers, one of whom does and the other guy sounds like Pavarotti. This huge booming vibrato, and it's just like it's so. And they alternate the way it. To me, it's like that perfect balance where it's like
System.
It is. It's very much like System in that way where you get the balance between you have the aggression of that kind of death metal singer that you need to take it to 11, but ultimately your ears kind of get worn out without something melodic. And then to have like Serge's voice, a voice with such incredible skill that your eyebrows raise up the minute he starts singing.
I was going to try, but I would just embarrass myself.
Now you have to.
There you go. That's it. Yeah, there you go.
But no, I love that stuff. Yeah. I mean, and again, like this is what I think it's the reason I love doing film music is I am so schizophrenic in my passions, and I love doing something I haven't done before.
It's one of the great aspects of film music. In fact, you and I both, I'm sure, get told people will submit things and sometimes say, "Doesn't this sound like movie music to you?" To which I would always say, What's movie music?
Yeah, you've lost
you do. A polka is movie music,
Yeah.
and an orchestral piece is movie music, and a guy playing on a solo melodica is movie music.
Mm-hmm.
Movie music is exactly what you said, which is everything. And speaking of solo melodicas, this is a perfect segue to Godzilla, don't you think?
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
it
just
is.
we want to get to that before we wrap up.
I was just going to say, and God of War to Godzilla
Yeah.
is kind of an interesting transition. Kenny and I were speaking about it earlier. When does that start for you, or has it started?
I'm done.
You're done.
In the can. It's been in the can for months.
It's in the can. And
Yeah.
the movie comes out.
May 31st.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And so
That's big.
The rumor out there, and I think you've spoken about this, is that you're calling back to the original Godzilla theme. Has that not been done? Because I know that some of the fans were like going nuts about it.
That theme has never appeared in a American Godzilla film before. Yeah, you're going to hear some permutations of some familiar themes in that film, and I think fans are going to be very happy. Let me put it that way.
I'm really excited to see how the film plays in 2019 because Godzilla represents a number of things in culture and in history and in the history of warfare.
For sure.
You know, there's a lot
And the history of cinema.
Yeah, there's a lot of association with Godzilla representing a post-nuclear world when it appeared and where it appeared from. So how that's interpreted in
Well, let me put it this way.
year.
Here's what I'm excited about. Godzilla is directed by Michael Dougherty, and for him, the way that I eventually realized the way he works, we were making a religious film. Okay, Godzilla means so much to him. I mean, I've seen the movies. He has internalized them on like a spiritual level. So all the decisions he makes are based on his entire like understanding of what the character means, what the different what the other different monsters mean, what these themes mean. It applies to music. It applies to everything. And I found myself just sort of trusting him so much because he really does understand this stuff on an even deeper level than I do. But when I say that, it there's something about the American films, especially obviously the 98 one, that has struggled to translate. And I think the 2014 movie did a really great job of showing that you could do something that's more in line with the Japanese films. But it still really had its foot firmly in like an American disaster film. This is just my opinion. You know what I mean? The way it was constructed. And Michael has made a monster movie. It is the real deal. And in a way, it's bonkers. It's so ambitious. It's so unlike other blockbusters. But I think ultimately that's what makes it. That's what made his pitch so compelling. I mean, it's why he's the guy to do it, because he understands why people have loved this character for so long, and he's been able to translate that into a big blockbuster setting, still preserving the core of the character.
And I love the fact that you said it's a spiritual experience for him, because, as we all know, the movies that succeed, they may be on screen like they're telling one story, but certainly the great ones have a depth. We talked earlier about Beauty and the Beast and Scissorhands and the similarity. Well, they're about some very big issues of evil, of some kind of adolescent growth, and a monster that's there, whether it's a Freudian kind of thing. But they're the deep themes, no matter how you tell the stories. And if it's a spiritual theme and a monster is the representation, those are the movies that succeed. So I'm really excited to see it.
I can't wait.
If you're saying that is a part of it instead of it's just superficial, it's a big monster that comes and stomps and stuff. Okay, we've seen that. Yeah,
it's been working on that film has been an incredible experience, and I also think that the way I approached it, which was also in line with Michael's vision, is that I think of Godzilla as one of cinema's great legacies. I think of that theme in the same way you think of the James Bond theme. I mean, and it predates it. I mean, you could make the argument, I don't want to be sacrilegious here.
Go ahead.
This is the oldest piece of film music that has had a continuous legacy that exists.
Nice.
You know what I mean? Like, James Bond is the next best one. But I can't think of a film series that started in the 50s and ebbing and flowing away and back to it essentially revolved around one theme for 70 years.
And you're bringing it back.
And the American films have, in embracing these other films, haven't embraced this. So
they were cool with you.
They were very cool.
Dipping
Michael definitely drove it. I mean, and again, it was a complicated matter with Toho. You know, all these rights are very complicated. It's not an easy thing to get. And Legendary was supportive. Warner Brothers was supportive, and we went for it. And also, you know, it was important to us that it not just be a fan service cameo. Like, if we're going to use a theme, I want it to be a theme.
Yeah,
you know.
Good.
So, I think fans are going to be happy.
Well, you've done now a huge video game, like one of the biggest. You've got arguably your biggest film coming out with this big blockbuster. You've done the indie films, TV series. Do you have a preference? I mean, I imagine the workflow is completely different on some of these.
I don't. As you might have pieced together, I'm somewhat schizophrenic, and I love doing different things.
Your preference is to work. My
preference is to work and on things that are inspiring. And at the end of the day, I really don't care what it goes into. I did a short film for a friend of mine over the summer. I'm always just looking for opportunities to do something I haven't done before. The workflow is, I mean, that's one of the things I've built up a great team here at Sparks and Shadows. I mean, I trust my team, with everything, so that I can just, on whatever project, get me in a room with the creative person. Let me get my ideas going. I know I need to make that creative decider happy. All the other stuff, like delivery, sometimes somebody will ask me, like, oh, when is this mixing? I'm like, I don't know. My team knows. Yeah. All I know is when I'm recording. Yeah. Like, I'm very focused in that way. But that means once you've got a team that you trust, it's like the technical parts of, like, what makes a game different from a show, different from a movie. Like, it's inconsequential to me.
Well, in some ways, you're isolating what is the story and the storytelling is
Indeed.
What's key, and then
let me underline, that's the part I want to do.
Yeah.
And the other stuff I don't want to do. It's not, I mentioned earlier how I did everything and I was so terrified to let it go. I look back on that in hindsight. I mean, the minute I stopped taping the parts, it wasn't like I was nostalgic. God, I remember those nights I stayed up doing the orchestrations myself. I mean, I have amazing orchestrators that I work with who understand my taste. They understand what I want. And all my ideas get on paper and it's lightning fast because I'm not the one, like, putting it all down on paper.
I think
these are important steps that I think aspiring composers need to do.
The final question that I wanted to ask, Sparks and Shadows.
Yeah.
Can you tell me how the name evolved? Because I love it.
I can. Well, I'll tell you, I wrote a piece in college called Sparks and Shadows. Nice. I was, as an undergrad, I got a piece on, at USC does this student concert, with one concert every year with the full symphony orchestra as a student piece. And one year I did this amazing sort of tone poem about William Mulholland and the collapse of the St. Francis Dam. It was a piece for mezzo-soprano. It was almost like this little mini sort of opera. It was very ambitious. And it was my first taste of hearing a symphonic orchestra play my music.
Wow.
The next year, I said to my teachers, I want to do a piece again. I want this experience. And the teachers are like, look, we almost never have undergrads. It's usually the grad students. And no one would ever do the same undergrad 2 years in a row. This is now my last year. So it's like, it's not going to happen. I mean, unless you, like, wrote something really short and, like, amazing. So I went, got it. So I wrote a piece that was like 2.5 minutes long, just bright and colorful and flashy and just so undeniably fun and cinematic, almost just as a way to, like, prove to them, I'm going to get this 2 years in a row, you know? And it was so short that it's like they couldn't help but put it on the program. And at the last minute, they go, what's it called? Oh, I had no name. So that's when I was trying to think of like, what do I call it? And there were all these sort of like sparkling figures and then ominous low brass. It was very cinematic. The sparks and shadows. So that was the name of the piece. And then years later, when I was doing Battlestar and I realized I have to form a corporation. Doing it not as a corporation was horrible. And I had no idea there would be any public-facing version of this. So I was just like, I'll just call it that. Oh, whatever, no one will ever see it. And so there's like Sparks and Shadows started off as like just a thing on a tax form. Now it is a studio. We have a logo. It's a record label. I've put out like 40 albums in the last 8 years. I mean, we've got a bunch coming out this year. And it is also as a studio, it is a place where young composers come and work.
Yeah.
And we bring on 12 interns a year. They're paid.
You sure you want to have this information out there because there was a line already all the way to
I think we met all 12
I know.
coming in here.
Well, I do because to me the great thing about having the studio and having it have an identity beyond me, it is a place where I hope people can come and get some foothold into the business, and many of them stick around. I mean, most of the people working for me full time were interns at some point. But I think, I mean, look, bring it full circle, right? I think about what Elmer did for me.
I was going to say that intern for Bear, for Elmer, for Aaron Copeland.
I feel this incredible need to pay it back for what Elmer did for me.
Yep.
That I really want to find that. Those other young composers that are ambitious and talented and don't have a place to go, you know? And
well, I think that the message is the place to go is the Rotary Club of Bellingham, Washington.
Exactly. And
that is where careers start.
Exactly. And if you're not going to go to the Rotary Club in Bellingham, Washington, I think Sparks and Shadows is your second choice.
There you go. Well, I think that, Bear, thanks so much for spending the time with us.
We know. So interesting.
Is there anything you want to push upcoming besides Godzilla? Anything you got working on? Are you doing any concerts?
There's nothing I can announce yet. So there's so many fun things I want to talk about.
Never want to jinx them.
I know, exactly. No, I think we're good. We've covered a lot of stuff.
How great.
Again, we want to thank Bear McCreary for joining us. Be sure, if you like what you're hearing, to go to Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform, rate and review, and click subscribe. And tell a friend if you like what you're hearing, too. It helps spread the word.
I'm Robert Kraft. Thanks to Kenny Holmes and our guest today, Bear McCreary, for an exceptional first episode of Season 2.
Thanks, you guys.
We'll see you next time.